Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today I have Jessica Elefante, a writer, artist, and activist. So I've been really looking forward to this conversation. And first, I thought we could just get to know each other a little bit. So tell me, like, where you're from and what brought you to work in this space.
Yeah, so I live in New York. I'm in Brooklyn, and I kind of accidentally fell face first into this space. I never thought this would be what I was doing with my life, but I worked in marketing and branding for a really long time
Mm-hmm.
before we had all these apps. And when the apps started to realize and that they could, be a place to monetize for brands and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
I had this sort of old lingo that I was able to explain to the C-suite why they needed to put money behind this and build out these communities in these social media platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And so I literally started a class called Viral Networking 101
Mm-hmm.
for small business owners and corporate people to understand what the heck this was.
Yeah.
And I guess the really abridged version is I did that for a long time with a lot of standard success and accolades. But at the same time that I was being rewarded, I started feeling really unwell myself. And I didn't know what it was. Doctors tried to figure out what was making me have such a significant memory loss, malaise, brain fog,
Mm-hmm.
disassociation, lack of word recall, and nobody had any answers. And you named any suggestion, I tried it, it didn't work. But I found out what it was. It was my overuse of
Mm-hmm.
technology, and the fact that I was one of the earliest adopters of using it in this way of kind of 24/7 communicating on behalf of my clients. That I had gone without tech for 8 days, not by choice, forced by my ex-husband at the time on a family vacation. Today, you would call it a digital detox. And I, my brain switched back on
Wow.
completely and wholly. I could tell you what the sheets felt like underneath my skin. I had a vivid memory of smelling like the salt in the air of I was in Hawaii, and I hadn't noticed it the first 8 days, but I woke up and I could smell this salt, and just everything was so like vivid and clear. And when I talk about this now, or at first back then, people would come up to me and they'd say, "That's the sound of an addict getting sober." That you say the same things
Wow.
of myself, who was I've been sober 20 years, and no one was making these parallels at the time. It was like 2012,
Mm-hmm.
2013. And today it's known as digital dementia, and unfortunately the rest of society is likely caught up with me at this
Wow.
point. And so I came back from that vacation and decided to start using all my evil marketing powers for good and advocating for change around how we think of technology and digital worlds. And I really truly believed that we could change our relationship with
Mm-hmm.
it, and that the creators of these platforms had some motivations to listen to what I was saying and what people were feeling to protect us and make it a place that was fostering real connection and allowing people to be creative and not all the negatives that came with
Mm-hmm.
it. And I spent almost a decade, I guess now, talking about hacking our way out of this, and laying the responsibility, I now realize, at the feet of people or
Mm-hmm.
children, saying you should be able to set a timer. Oh, you should put your phone away. Why are you always on it?
Mm-hmm.
And offering these sort of tips, tricks, and suggestions through my company, which was called Folk Rebellion. And I came to terms in a very hard way that it was not possible to have a healthy relationship with tech and digital until it's designed that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote a book called Raising Hell, Living Well: Freedom from Influence in a World Where Everyone Wants Something from
Mm-hmm.
You, including myself, because I'm making an ironically persuasive case
Mm-hmm.
that you shouldn't fall for these things and be manipulated. Um, and that's kind of what leads me to you today. I know it's a lot, but that's the journey. And I get really excited when I see people like you, and what's happening in culture right now. There's just so many good people doing such good work of sharing these stories and bringing attention to this thing
Mm-hmm.
when um, most people thought I was nuts a decade
God, that
ago.
must have been such a frustrating long 10 years because you really
Yes,
you were seeing it excuse me. You were seeing it right at the beginning. I mean, and that's right when the kids started getting really affected and where we start seeing those spikes of depression and suicidal ideation, especially in young girls. We didn't have that research
yeah,
at the time. You were seeing it
no, it was
in
just
yourself.
exactly
Because we weren't really at first letting kids into those digital worlds as much. I think it really
as
happened right
much.
through
Yeah.
those 2010s, 12, 14, those years. We have such a similar background because I was in marketing too for almost 15 years and
Oh
started
wow.
my own social media management business because I noticed small business owners who were okay, my parents were restaurant owners, started there, and they had no idea how to do social media. And I realized like they need to be on social media in order to compete with like they had a pizza
Of
place
course.
with Pizza Hut and all these big brands. And so I helped them set up their social media platforms and just sort of built from there. Um, but yeah, I started to also feel some feelings about what I was doing and how I was targeting people and how detailed you could get and manipulating decisions and also reflecting on how it was making me feel as like a young mom with little kids and sharing them on there. I wonder how that played into it. Like what are your feelings about like where did your kids come into play and how did you feel
Oh
about
yeah.
sharing them on social media?
Yeah, so I mean, I left corporate America and started Folk Rebellion because I had this just recurring thought. If I became this addicted and unwell in such a short span of
Mhm.
time, having had a full life without any of
Yeah.
this, like I'm from like the Adirondacks, I didn't get a cell phone until I was in my
Uh-huh.
20s. We didn't have a family computer, like nothing. We had
Wow.
nothing. Um, if I became this addicted and unwell in such a short period of time, like what did the future look like? How did these kids have any
Yeah.
chance if they don't even know a world that's different,
Mhm.
right? So I started it for Hayes, my
Mhm.
oldest, and trying to change the world for him. You know, it's such a big altruistic idea, but why do we do anything? We do it for our
Sure.
kids,
Of course.
right? And um, even then, like right now, so I have very small social media profile. Like I have one professionally for Folk Rebellion or my personal, for my
Yeah.
creations. And then I have an alias that I've had from day one on
Mhm.
Facebook that only people who like really know
Mhm.
me, right? My OG friends, my family, that's on
Yeah.
Facebook. But now everything is blurring and it's hard to keep hiding one from the
Yeah.
other. Um, and even with my more public one on Instagram, I would share a little bit of my kids. Previously it was never centered around them. I didn't create content
Yeah.
around them. But if I shared a piece of my life and they happened to be a part of
Mhm.
it, it was there. It wasn't a lot, but it was
Mhm.
there. But what's happened now is with kind of how I'm seeing things roll out with AI and just the lack of any sort of help or no one's coming to save us, any regulation
Mhm.
that um, all of this stuff, I can't possibly predict anymore whose hands it's going to end up in and how it's going to be used. So people have noticed I've started for the first time ever, like covering, if I do share anything, I cover their
Mhm.
face, even if it's in
Yeah.
profile. I'm removing everything that I have put up of them. I'm getting rid of, their names, like anything, again, 10 years ago, like you'd post on Instagram with the cheesy filter, the lo-fi filter. Like no one thought anything
Mhm.
of having a few friends because you couldn't possibly predict or understand where this was going to
Right.
go and how exploited we would all be by, you know, buying into this sort of free service that then is just stealing from us our children's faces, their names, the language in which we communicate. And so, yeah, so everything is for my kids. I'm backtracking actually at the 1 year anniversary of my book coming
Mm-hmm.
out. I'm deleting all my profiles.
Okay.
And I have, I have to keep that on just because there were people who helped me and I want to help them in return,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's why it's there, but I'm barely using it.
Yeah.
And with my kids, I also have a 2-year-old now. So I'm able to speak at how different things are a decade
Yeah.
later. And they don't get anything. I'm the mean mom. And I really am.
Yeah, I kind of resent the mean mom comment. I'm sort of like,
I know.
it's
I
just
know.
we're giving them the gift of like a
Of
healthy
course.
brain, you know.
For
Oh,
sure. And a normal child and a child, not a normal childhood, a childhood free from exploitation and danger and being pigeonholed and identified to later become good consumers.
yeah.
And yeah.
And
Hmm.
focusing on a play-based childhood. And I'm doing a series with teachers right now called Teachers Talk. I'm just interviewing teachers about screen use in schools. And one interesting thing that's always coming up is kids can't pay attention for very long. And they definitely can't be bored. We all know that. But because from when they were babies, anytime they were uncomfortable or upset, we handed them an iPad to play with. Yeah,
Pacifier.
and
Yeah.
they had no ability to develop those skills. And now they all have smartphones as well. So we digitally pacify them while they're at school.
Mhm.
Even when they have a problem, they can just
Mhm.
text us and we reassure them over text. So really just no skills on how to pacify themselves, to calm themselves, to be bored. And so I think more
Yeah.
parents are realizing now. I have a 3-year old and we don't do any devices and that kind of thing. And I think we're coming around to realize the harm in handing them those devices at those super young ages, just not necessary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, it's kind of crazy to me to think that there are still people trying to provide solutions to these kids and this problem, and these teachers saying, oh, well, we'll bring in like a mindfulness app, right? And
Yeah.
so here's the device again that, as opposed to actual learning human skills and having the connection that they need.
Yeah.
And so that idea that, like, you know, techno supremacy, like it's gonna fix everything. We've got to turn to tech every
Mm-hmm.
time, when in fact, as you said, it's play based. It's removing, letting them feel uncomfortable, putting them together in a puppy pile, figure out how to play. um in I think that, like, a lot of my work or viewpoints or philosophies came from the fact of, like, I was born before any of
Mm-hmm.
this. I was raised like a 1980s Goonie, like, get outside,
Yeah.
like, don't come home until
Yeah.
supper. And then I had the very opposite experience of this crazy digital environment. And when I looked to my kid, I wanted him to have a lot of what I had, but around me, things were changing where I could no longer, like, I didn't have the power to say I wanted him to play outside by himself, because I was afraid, like, culture was shifting so
Mm-hmm.
quickly that I wasn't afraid of him getting hurt or stolen by a man in a white van, stranger danger. I was afraid of a neighbor calling child protective services. And so I think a lot of this is all under the same umbrella
Mm-hmm.
of, like, we dash into these cultural norms of um, what's okay or expected, but intrinsically for me, I know it's wrong, or I feel it's wrong, or I believe it's wrong. And so for me, tech and the overprotection of kids and wanting them to play outside, and
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of all lives together. And it's nice to see, with Jonathan Haidt's new book
Yeah.
out, and Lenore, her program Let
Mm-hmm.
Grow is the fourth recommendation. And Lenore actually blurbed my book,
Oh
which I was
wow.
so
Yeah.
proud of, because I have a chapter called 80s Mom,
Mm-hmm.
which is essentially the argument that Jonathan Haidt's book makes, which is that we've overprotected kids in the real
Yep.
world and literally just dropped them off at the local, dive
Yeah.
bar, the online
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
with no protections
Right.
whatsoever. And So I wanted Lenore to read my book, and she did, and she's a rock star. So it kind of feels like there's a lot of wood being added to the fire right now, and
I
I'm
agree.
hopeful.
Yeah. I hope we get to a point where instead of feeling like someone should call CPS because your kid's playing in the front yard, CPS should be called if your kid is on their device at night by themselves with unrestricted internet access. Like that's
Oh yeah.
abuse.
Oh, I mean, yes, I definitely agree with that. I think that someday we are going to look back and it's going to be horrifying to see what we've done. In the same way, it'd be like looking at a bunch of children smoking cigarettes in
Right.
photos,
Right.
right? If we were to see that today, of what we'd be
Yeah.
horrified. Um,
Yeah.
but it takes a long time for humans, normal sort of what they think is normal to shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's shifting. It is starting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing this 10 years. I'm saying it's just starting now.
Yeah. And I just think I got lucky with like the timing. I don't know. It just, I started the podcast in September, and then there's just like Congress hearing, like lawsuits, more parents speaking up, more books. It's just we're on a roll, and I can just feel this momentum, and I feel more parents talking about it. And I'm so happy that I'm part of the conversation and that I can like elevate voices that like yours that have been trying to
Yeah,
say
no,
this for years.
we need that because, and honestly, it was funny. I was talking with Jonathan Haidt and his team, and they're like, we're so grateful for the outpouring of support from people who have been in this fight for a long time, because he didn't come from this. He came from something
Mm-hmm.
else. It's just what he
Yes.
saw and was able to make sense of it. And I was like, are you kidding me? All ships rise. It's not, there's no ego in this
No.
game. Like, it's all about the kids. It's all about the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
It's fixing the world. And those of us who've been here for a little while, we're tired and we're burnt from
Yeah.
the internet and creating the content engines and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. So it feels nice to go, you know what? I don't have to get out there like I did, 6 years ago, that because there's other voices here now. And
Mm-hmm.
it feels really awesome to be able to say that.
Yeah. So I think we'll start to see some legislation maybe to help.
I was in Albany 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago. I hope
Oh my God.
so.
It's like, come on. Uh, Legislation also schools actually not only banning smartphones in schools, but following through with it from the district level, not leaving it all to the teachers to try to implement, struggling.
Yep.
So but it still does come down to the parents and their decisions in the home. And so what are some of like a couple of the most important things that you think parents need to be thinking about when it comes to screen use in their kids?
It's hard. Everyone's different because their kids are at different ages and their situations are different.
Yep.
But I would say, the first thing you could do if you don't have smartphones is delay, right? That, I mean, and that kind of goes for anything for me. I'm talking iPads, smartphones, video game consoles, access to anything that has the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
I've always said, someone came up with the slogan, delay is the way. I used to just say, I'm kicking the can so far down the road, I can't see it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even like my son will ask me tonight, Mom, can I get an iPhone when I'm 18? I went, we'll discuss it when we're 18.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just keep kicking it further and further.
Yeah.
Um, so that's like one of the better things that you could do. And then if you do have any of these devices, it's understanding that first and foremost, just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it's not happening. It is most likely happening. And when I say it is happening, it is probably all the things that you don't want to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they are definitely seeing inappropriate content,
Mm-hmm.
right? They are definitely experiencing or being
Yeah.
bullies in these sort of realms.
Sure.
Their data is being stored, collected, saved, and utilized against them at some point in the future if it's not already.
Mm-hmm.
They are becoming lulled into submission through dopamine addiction, through any sort of algorithm that they're on. And so even though you may not see it, what I'm finding is a lot of people will say, the first thought is like, not my kid, or I've protected them, or this stuff is so smart, and these
Mm-hmm.
people are so smart that they are going to find ways through. And so even when you think you're being safe, likely it's not. So I always say to, instead of just banning,
Mm-hmm.
you have to talk about why, and bring it back to um, education and values.
Mm-hmm.
So my son, I wrote this book for Hayes specifically because he had gone to a friend's house,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing
I just wrote down friend's house.
they were making a,
That was going to be my next
yeah, a
question. What
friend's house.
happens when he goes to a
Yeah.
friend's house?
So that's the thing. I kind of think of it like food and movies, right? We have our rules in our house, but other houses different
Yeah.
rules. And I still want you to be able to go to other kids'
Yeah.
houses, but have a good head on your shoulders. Hopefully I've done my due diligence of knowing the type of houses he's going to and the type of families he's with.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's there, if he's going to play a video game, he's going to play a video game. If someone is on an iPad or has a phone out that's on TikTok, like, he knows I don't want him on it. I don't want him to see it. So he asks to do something else. This was an incident of they had a video studio set up, and his friend was showing him how you could like bounce a ball throughout the room and make it disappear and show up in different
Mm-hmm.
places. And he was having so much fun, almost like the producer of this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I get that. I'm a creative. That's really
Yeah.
fun. Well, he knows that you're not allowed to have his likeness shared anywhere
Mm-hmm.
or posted
Oh.
anywhere. And that I told him, he has to give consent or get my consent.
Mm-hmm.
So the kid, he had called to ask if they could make the video. I said, yes, of course. And then the kid went to go upload it to a YouTube
Mm-hmm.
channel. And he goes, oh, no, you don't have my consent to do that. And the kid goes, what's that? And so it started, and he called me in a panic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it's
Yeah.
okay. Like, are you doing anything embarrassing in it? Make sure your name doesn't end up in any of the
Mm-hmm.
data in the copy that he writes. It's fine. We'll talk about it
Yeah.
when he gets home. So he came home and he's like, essentially, not in these words, but like, what the hell, mom? Like, I'm the weird kid, and he says to me, he goes, I know these
Mm-hmm.
things because you taught me and we talk about
Mm-hmm.
them, but other people don't know these things and the adults don't know these
Mm-hmm.
things. So what am I supposed to do? Can't you just tell everyone? And I was
Oh,
like,
I'm trying, honey.
okay, I'm
Yeah.
trying. I'm like, maybe I need to put it all together in like this like guide,
Yeah.
right? So that's how the book came
Mm-hmm.
about. And so, you know, all I know is I can't control what happens when he goes out in the world. I can control how much the world comes at him in my own
Yeah.
home, right? Like, I see it as like the outside world is let in through any one of these. I
Mm-hmm.
call them like portals to predators. And the predators can be like misogynistic, like crazy shock jock podcasters, to, advertisements that are super inappropriate on a video game that I have ad blockers on. All of these things have
Mm-hmm.
happened with him having no phone and no devices. So think about
Right.
that, right? Um, so we talk about how always bring it to me. We'll figure it out
Mm-hmm.
together. And when he asks, like, oh, what would have happened? I say, let's play the game. What could have happened? So, for example, someone handed him a postcard outside of school, an invitation to a party in the city. I can remember this vividly from when I was 15, being invited by kids from another school or a high school, handing me a pamphlet or a
Mm-hmm.
flyer. This one had a QR code on it.
Mm.
And the teacher snatched it and ripped it up and said, don't ever scan a QR code that you don't
Yeah.
know. And he came home and he's like, well, I couldn't because he has a dumb
Mm-hmm.
phone. I don't have, I can't scan anything and I don't have the internet. And he goes, so what would have been on the other end of that QR code? And I go, well, let's play the
Mm-hmm.
game. What could have been? And the first thing he came out with was, it could have been someone blackmailing me to murder my family. I went, could have.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy where your mind goes. What else could it
Yeah.
have been? And it just got us to, and it's this idea that I can't always protect him, but like what our values
Mm-hmm.
are, and what we believe in and what we don't, and why I'm not allowing these
Yeah.
things. Like, he knows how the internet works. He knows that advertising is, funneling through the algorithms, almost creating we talk about these
Mm-hmm.
things on a very deep level, and I have been doing it since he's been about 2 years
Yeah.
old. So That's my advice to
Yeah.
parents is don't just ban it, but explain why, talk about it, and bring it back to your
Yeah,
values.
because before we know it, they're going to be out of our house and they're going to need to manage this themselves. So they have to
For
understand those
sure.
principles.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and also, I mean, it could just be as something as simple as the kid sitting next to you is looking at, you know, uh,
mhm.
anything, right?
Yeah,
Like pornography. It could be just TikTok that happens to have pornography kind of scrolling
yeah,
through it. Like, so you have to hope that you have instilled the sense in your child to excuse
hmm,
themselves or tell you.
yeah. Well, so at his school, are smartphones allowed at the school?
They just got rid of them. So this has been a whole huge learning curve, which is awesome. So um, the thing that changed the game was the Surgeon General's
Okay.
warning. When that
Yeah.
happened, finally, the first people were teachers or principals to say, okay, at least in our school, the next day it came out. We are now a smartphone free, a phone free school.
Amazing.
But the kids still come in with them. So they had to set up a whole system. And the system was that they would check them in upon arrival in first period. And then the device, because they move, they're in middle school, would arrive to their last period and they would get it as they were walking out the
Hmm.
door. So you don't have it for recess. It's not in your locker, things like
Amazing.
that. It was
Yeah.
awesome. It was life changing. My son was like, the whole feeling of the school
Yeah.
changed because each one, friend by friend, would get a smartphone for a birthday or something. And he'd go, lost another one today.
Mhm.
That was what he would say, like they died or something because they had gone into this realm that he wasn't
Yeah.
in. And so he was so excited about that. And then the kids figured out that they could say, I don't have, I forgot it today or something. And they just keep it down in their backpack. And the school doesn't feel comfortable say going through the property or something like that. And so I kept seeing all these panic emails in the past couple of weeks with everything that was going on in press and in the Senate and in the
Yeah.
legislation. So they said, please, can you tell your kids to turn their phones in, please? Like, and then Hayes is like, I'm the only one who turns it in. I'm so embarrassed. So there was that whole problem. So I responded back to them and I was like, hey, I'm a part of Mothers Against Media Addiction. I'm the co-chair for the Brooklyn chapter. And I think I have an idea. I'd love to try it with you guys. What if you actually got the parents' permission to take the phone?
Hmm.
So send out, let's do a Google like submission template.
Hmm.
What's your name? Does your child have a phone? Yes. Do you want them to turn it in? Yes. If they say they don't have it, do I have your permission to look for it? Yes. So now they have a spreadsheet, they open it up and it says, oh, actually, so and so, your mother says you do have a phone. And if you say no, to check your
Yeah.
bag. And I was like, we have to do
Yeah.
something because they're going to continue lying. The school doesn't want to offend anyone for fear of
Hmm.
whatever. I was like, just get the parents'
Hmm.
permission. And it's working.
Good. Are any of them given over like dummy phones or like second phones? Like
No, not yet that I know of, but
like
they're
the
still
manager.
young. So yeah, maybe that's high
I
school.
can't keep hearing about that. Oh my gosh.
Oh
Okay.
no.
I'm so happy. And I feel like that's the only way it works is if you collect them at the beginning of the day. You cannot
Yeah.
let them have it in their zipper
No,
pocket, in their locker, even because then they're running. First of all, they're going to the bathroom any moment they can to go to the locker.
yeah,
Any in between classes, they're not interacting because they're just at their lockers looking at their
of
like,
course.
there's no solution other than taking it.
Well, and there is science, and this is what I would say to like all the parents who want to start making changes for their
Hmm.
kids. Find the bit of research that helps your case. So I know that there is science that proves that if there's a phone within a 1 foot radius that you know is there in your desk drawer, in your purse on the floor, um, it is distracting you from the moment because it's literally like calling for you, like
Hmm.
that itch is so
Yeah.
strong. There's science about if a phone is on a table during a conversation at a
Hmm.
restaurant, it shortens the conversation by
Oh
25
my
minutes because both
God.
people know that there's a world waiting for them and that anxiety,
Hmm.
which we all
Yeah.
feel. Of course, I'm sitting here talking to you right now and I know that people are trying to get a hold of
Hmm.
me, right? It's that constant always. And because it's so instant and urgent, we're not qualifying uh, if it's an emergency
Hmm.
or if it's just right? And so we're training our kids to accept that, of that constant state of anxiety from overwhelm and digital pings, and distracting ourselves from learning
Mm-hmm.
and being in conversation with our friends, even if it's just in our backpack on the
Right.
floor. So don't allow
Yeah.
it.
And let's culturally shift to parents. We don't need to be contacting our children all day long. If they do have a phone, we can't. That's what teachers are desperately asking parents. Don't text them to ask what they want for dinner. Don't ask about their test during the day. It's too distracting. Just because you have the ability to contact them doesn't mean you should. It's affecting their learning.
Right. Of course. Of
Hmm.
course. And then it's like those fragmented conversations all day long. My husband and I, we've talked about it, and sometimes we'll have to do like a reset, and I'm like, all these things you're asking me all day, we can talk about
Hmm.
tonight when we sit down to
Yes.
eat. Like, just save it. Just like, we don't have to do everything in real time. I'm
Hmm.
busy, I'm at work, I'm writing, or I'm with the kids. Save it.
Yeah.
Let us actually have a conversation at
Hmm.
dinner about all these things. It makes it a more robust
Yeah.
conversation. um and also on that, like, they're distracting the kids from learning. But if, one of the pushbacks that I keep hearing is like, people want their kids to have phones in case there's like a mass shooting or something bad happens at the school, but because they want them to be safe, or they want them to be safe, on a smaller scale of walking to school or getting to school.
Hmm.
But by having the phone, they are distracted from crossing the street and not paying attention,
Hmm.
right? They're sharing potentially misinformation, if it's just a fire drill,
Uh-huh.
out to parents everywhere, saying to friends, saying that there's an active whatever.
Hmm.
Parents are now calling the school. In those moments, if you really want your child to be safe, you want them to be actually safe,
Hmm.
and that means not having these devices which make it unsafe. The idea of safety is trumping actual safety with these phones. Like, we've been
Right.
conditioned to think that having them equals safety. And
Hmm.
so it's actually the opposite,
Right.
right? In every way, shape, and
It
form. And
is.
so with my son, when he got his dumb phone, he started being like, he'd go to the park a block and a half away. Oh, I forgot my phone. I need my phone. I was like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Why do you need your phone?
Right.
You don't have to be tracked or be incommunicado
Hmm.
to be safe. Like, to be safe means to use your brain. I trust you,
Hmm.
and to be present. Um, it doesn't mean having a phone on you.
No, I just said this yesterday. In specifically in a school shooting situation, having their phone on them makes them more unsafe. The lights and the dings, and we're supposed to be quiet and be paying attention and not trying to videotape
Oh
the
yeah, I didn't even.
situation. Like, if a shooter walks into a classroom, a dark classroom, and a kid's phone lights up, that shooter's going to shoot at that phone. Like, let's
Yeah,
just get really
exactly.
down to brass tacks. Like, those phones are not keeping them safe in a school shooting situation. And
Yep.
I've got hundreds of comments on certain videos saying my kid will have a phone on them because of school shootings. And it's like, let's think about what actually happens in a school shooting and not just blanket statement.
So this is very similar to what happened with stranger danger
Mm-hmm.
and people putting their kids in the safe confines of their
Mm-hmm.
homes, because it was this idea um, of that there's this horrific, terrible thing that no one ever wants to happen. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
they don't ever want their child to be a part of their club, that club. But the risk is so actually small, like numbers
Mm-hmm.
wise. But you then make this huge shift in how you're raising them or what they're experiencing to account for that tiny, tiny, tiny
Right.
percent, when the 99 other percent is actually doing more
Mm-hmm.
damage to them. And I'm really, really, like, I could think all day about what transpired between milk cartons with kids' faces
Right.
on them, the Dare program, mixed with stranger danger, and 5 o'clock news. If it leads, it bleeds. It was like the perfect
Mm-hmm.
storm of fear mongering for parents, and that is where you arrive at the overprotected helicopter
Mm-hmm.
generation. And now we're seeing what happens to those kids as adults, and they're anxious, and it's because they've never felt trusted to exist in a world, and they've been taught that they should be afraid of everything.
Mm-hmm. Hannah Ortel she's has the Delay Smartphones organization out of the UK. She shared something with me like the stat is you'd have to leave your children out in your front garden for like 14 million years for them to get actually like abducted. It's actually very
Yeah,
such a low percentage or
right.
probability that they're actually going to get taken. It's so
In that stereotypical sort of
yeah,
manner,
right.
right? Um, and because even when you look at the numbers, which I have a lot of it, majority of it, 85%, I think I'll have to look at afterwards, is those kidnappings that you hear, they're
Mm-hmm.
family, right? It's child custody cases, it's a things like that. So in that stereotypical sort of Dateline scenario that none of us ever
Mm-hmm.
want, it is essentially nil.
Right.
And I just had a thought. It left my mind. You were talking about this of how of what the numbers were, but never
Yeah.
mind. Anyway, it's yeah, something about how overprotected they are in the real
Yeah.
world,
And so,
and
well, if you think about it, so we're trying to protect them by keeping them inside and handing them devices, right? And then, right, they're
yep,
like on devices for 3 hours a day. Now they have double the risk of depression and anxiety. It's like, and the
of course,
percentages, the high percentages of cyberbullying, like it doesn't even like compare.
right?
It's
No,
far more harmful being inside on a device than it is being outside and playing.
exactly. And that's what my note was
Yeah.
going to be. It's kind of like the moral panic of making this huge drastic
Hmm.
change that makes no
Hmm.
sense. And actually the data provides that it's the opposite. You're doing them a disservice, you're harming them by doing this. But also to what I was saying of you can't just protect
Hmm.
them. You have to protect them and explain
Yeah.
why. And so if you know, instead of hiding your children away from the man in the white van, we could talk to them about these scenarios if they ever occurred, how rare they are, and how we expect them to behave. So it comes back to that critical
Hmm.
thinking that instead of just overprotecting them all the
Hmm.
time, actually teach them how to
Yeah.
exist in these horrifying situations if they do
Yeah,
happen.
because the risks are so high, especially online. Like when we grew up, our parents, most parents didn't talk to their kids about like pornography or these kind of things that were online. Well, they weren't online. You just,
Yeah.
or about sex, say. So you had to figure it out from your friends or, figuring it out. And nowadays, so the risks weren't as great, right? Parents didn't have to tell us about it because we would figure it out. But nowadays, it's like if you're letting your kid figure out about porn and sex online, it's like crazy what they're seeing and it's not realistic. And so you have to, like, we have to have these types of uncomfortable conversations
Yes.
so that when they go online, they have some sense of reality and guidance and they can go
Yeah.
to us to ask us about it because we already talked with them about it, right?
Exactly. And listen, I'm mad that we have to have these
I know.
conversations. I'm mad that we have to talk about all of these different things. It's literally
Yeah.
exhausting to think about the next thing that I have to teach him or bring up at the kitchen table and go through what our code of ethics or values is because it's never ending um bad actors or whatever, and it never ending lack of
Hmm.
protection from the people who are supposed to protect us, our government and you
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I'm
Hmm.
tired. It's
Yeah.
hard. This is not
Hmm.
easy. And so they the the tech companies and media companies, they know this, right? And they know how easy it is to pacify
Hmm.
them or hand this over instead of doing the hard parental work of saying no,
Hmm.
no, listening to their whining, talking about all of these really inappropriate hard things, finding workarounds for if your kid's being left out because they can't have a conversation about, my example is always he came to me with Fortnite and he couldn't be a part of a conversation at a table at lunch because he'd never played
Hmm.
Fortnite. And it wasn't actually about the video game, it was about belonging and being able to have the conversation with his
Hmm.
friends. And so I went and I bought the stupid Fortnite books and we read them. And then I went and Googled the dances and then I taught them to
Hmm.
him. This was
Yeah.
exhausting. I don't want to know either. I hate that I had to buy the books. I hate that that's what we had to talk about. But like it made him feel comfortable so that guess what? He didn't ask for Fortnite again for like another 6 years.
Hmm. Hmm.
But this is the hard work that we have to do. And I know we're all tired and we have so much on our plates,
Yeah.
but We have
Yeah.
to.
Okay, so tell me what you're working on. Tell me about Mothers Against Media Addiction and anything else that listeners can connect with you on.
Yeah, so Mothers Against Media Addiction, MAMA, was founded by journalist Julie
Hmm.
Scelfo. She is absolute dynamo, incredible. I saw her speak, and I had actually gone to see another person who was speaking around digital wellness and tech safety, but she was interviewing
Hmm.
them. And having her stand up there and speak as a journalist so smartly about, the state of the tech and our kids, and have her voice quiver like a mom
Mm.
and just say, I'm sick of this, I'm done. I ran backstage, and I introduced myself. I was like, you're going to be how this changes. You're the voice for all these
Hmm.
parents who are figuring out we have to do something, but we don't know
Yes.
what. So from that, it's brand new. It's just rolling
Hmm.
out. It's a, essentially kind of following MAD, Mothers Against
Hmm.
Drunk
Hmm.
Driving, where it's a parent-led grassroots organization that is rolling out in chapters
Hmm.
nationwide, that is going to allow parents or people, grandparents,
Yeah.
educators, to start to push back on these sort of pervasive influences in our kids'
Hmm.
life. And so um, we want phones out of schools.
Hmm.
We are going to work on educating parents, and then we're going to be pushing for change in
Yes.
legislation.
Great.
And each chapter is kind of going to operate, under the umbrella. But, what we need here, like I live in New York
Hmm.
City, might be very different than what someone might need in Florida or what someone might need in, Montana,
Yeah.
right? People different like people who live in a rural area might actually require phones for a true safety
Hmm.
reason,
Hmm.
right, if they're working around like animals or something like that. This is something that I've heard, versus safety on a subway with a phone. Don't actually need it. It's the exact
Hmm.
opposite. So giving each chapter the kind of guiding principles and the plans for
Hmm.
execution allows them to go out in their own communities and figure out like what's their best way to, kind of push back in their schools
Yes.
and in their sports and in their kids' doctors' offices or
Yeah.
wherever. And it's been wild. I just started with her a couple months ago, and we were up in Albany, meeting with legislators and senators, really pushing for them to pass these two bills that are there in New York State right
Hmm.
now. And then we did a rally outside of Meta,
Hmm.
which
I saw some
was
pictures.
really terrifying. And it's kind of like this full circle moment for me. And it was so powerful and really upsetting, to be honest with you, to stand, with these families that, again, you don't ever want to be a part of this
Right.
club,
Hmm.
but any one of us
Yeah.
could be. And to see them be able to share their story and still advocate for these sort of changes, and we're asking for basically nothing, right? Like these are the like bottom basement, just get our foot
Hmm.
in the door to get any sort of
Yeah.
legislation, and it's still not happening.
Hmm.
And so we just have to keep throwing wood on the fire and shouting from every corner of the internet. The cool thing is I'm seeing more people than ever saying these
Yeah.
things and doing these
Yeah.
things. And um, it could be big rebellions like that, or I like to kind of always tell people, like, how can you raise a little hell in your day to day?
Hmm.
So something simple was, we haven't been invited back into the school since the pandemic. Everything's on Zoom. And I was like, it would be really lovely post pandemic, this many years, to do the parent teacher conference in person.
Hmm.
When can I expect that?
Hmm.
Not can we do it?
Yeah.
Like, when can I expect that?
Yeah.
Right. So taking the power away from these devices that's consuming everything, right? Because it is power. I'm not walking into his classroom. I'm not seeing things. I'm not getting to look at the artwork and everything. I'm only seeing what is sent home or on a Zoom
Hmm.
call with his teacher. It totally changes the
Oh, yeah.
dynamic. And so I feel like I have a right to be able to come into his school and see what he's
Mm-hmm.
doing. And guess what? This morning we had his first live debate in front of the
Oh,
whole school, and it was packed
yay.
with parents and grandparents, and it was amazing.
Amazing.
And so it's like little things like that all day
Mm-hmm.
long. Be a pest, be a parent, be kind of like a 1980s mom. My mother would storm into any office,
Mm-hmm.
any room, like,
Yeah.
and we need to start to remember we are the adults in
Yeah.
the room.
And we're the advocates for the kids. Like this is not their fault, but they're the ones being
No.
affected and we have to speak up. And I think a powerful part here with mama is like connect with other people in your area that feel the same way, or you can get together with people and go to your school together with some research and some talking points, right,
Yes. Oh
about the
yeah.
devices and your concerns.
Yeah, and also it helps in, you know, it's much easier to get rid of phones or iPads or video game consoles when 5 other families
Right,
do it with you,
exactly. Yes.
right? So collective
Yeah.
action, and because that's really all the kids care
Mm-hmm.
about is being with their friends. And if their friends are all on Snapchat or their friends are all on whatever the new video game is, then that is the
Mm-hmm.
hurdle. So you have to be
Mm-hmm.
persuasive. You have to, share this
Mm-hmm.
information with those you care about and those your kids care
Yeah.
about, to try and get them to come over to what I call the dark
Yeah.
side,
The right
the
side.
good
The
side.
right side.
Yeah.
I just hope we soon get to a point where it's like just such a minority of kids that are on Snapchat. Like they're the weird kids, like they're the kids that don't get it yet, and that you can see very
Yeah.
clearly the difference in where they're at with their mental health and their physical health versus the kids that are focusing on more positive activities.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so too. I see it
Hmm.
coming. I just hope it's faster than, you know, I just hope it's fast, because every day that we take, another kid is being
Yeah.
harmed in some
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
Many kids.
harmed and dying. It's that's why Scrolling to Death is the name of my podcast, because I saw such an increase in the suicide rates, the deaths by challenges, the deaths by drug overdoses or poisonings because of a pill they bought on Snapchat, that kind of thing. So it's
Yeah.
serious and it's here. And okay, so we can go to joinmama.org, right, for more
Yep,
information.
yep, or yep, exactly. Joinmama.org, and kind of just sign up
Hmm.
there, and you'll just be on our listserv. And then um, you get to go from there, of kind of like choose your own adventure of how you'd like to get
Okay,
involved.
amazing.
Um, and yeah, as far as me, I just told you I'm not really on social
Hmm.
media a
Hmm.
lot. But if you feel the need to follow along, what I call, it's like the dust balls blowing in the
Hmm.
desert, on Instagram, it's at Folk
Okay.
Rebellion. I also have a Substack called Modern Bullshit that talks about not just technology, but how it folds into sort of capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
consumerism, and things like that. Also, currently dust balls right
Hmm.
now,
Hmm.
but that will turn back
Okay.
on. And my book, Raising Hell, Living Well,
Yes.
came out in October. You can buy it wherever books are sold. It's a really nice sort of follow up to Jonathan Haidt's
Hmm.
book of, here's these 4 actions that you can
Yep.
take, but you need to hear it kind of a little bit more from a mother's perspective of how, story of someone else who's done it. So it's a little memoir, it's a little how to.
Hmm.
It's actually very influential and persuasive. Ha ha
Yeah.
ha. And yeah, so that's kind of my
Amazing,
deal.
Jessica. I'm gonna get a copy. I don't have a copy yet, but I'm gonna get one.
Oh my god, I can send you a
Okay, send me a
copy.
copy, please. I would love a copy
Yeah,
from you.
yeah, yeah. Of
Yeah.
course.
Okay. And I love that it's from, I think that that fits nicely with Jonathan Haidt's book, like then coming from the perspective of a mom that's actually taken these steps to see how it has benefited yours and your children's lives. I think that's incredible. Um,
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so
Thanks.
let's close out. So, thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I was looking forward to it. It lived up to my expectations. Uh, to the listeners, please connect with Jessica. I'll include all of those links that you mentioned in the episode notes, and I will be back with more insight into social media and screens and all the things very soon. So, let's be sure to stay in touch.
Oh, we will. Nikki, thank you again. And honestly, I cannot thank you enough for being such an amazing voice in this fight.
Thank you.
We need
Thank
you.
you.